Hello everyone, I am here to tackle about the moral deliberation. Moral deliberation will define as the detection, filtering, and weighing, consciously or unconsciously, relevant moral principles. Heuristics are concepts that identify morally relevant features, and thereby create a moral context. Moral verdicts, in contrast, will define as conscious or unconsciously. Valence opinions or commitments about what is morally wrong or not wrong, or what one morally ought to do or not to do. There is a big difference, a young child reasoning on the right thing to do, and the matter of morally mature individual arrives at an ethical decision. This necessary growth, which is maturation in moral reasoning, has been the focus of the study of many theorists. One of them is the American moral psychologist Lawrence Goldberg in 1927 to 1987, who theorized that moral development happens in 6 stages, which he divided into 3 levels. The first level is what he called pre-conventional, and it corresponds to how infants and young children think. This pre-conventional level, whose reasoning is centered on the consequences of one's action, is divided into 2 stages. The first stage of reasoning centers around obedience, and the avoidance of punishment to a young child's mind and action is good if it enables one to escape from punishment, bad if it leads to punishment. The second level of moral development, according to Goldberg, is conventional, since this is the age in which older children, adolescents, and young adolescents learn to conform of her group. In Goldberg reasoning, people who merely follow the rules and regulations of their institution, the laws of their community or state, the doctrine of their religion, even if they seem to be the truly right thing to do, are trapped in this second or conventional level, which is still not yet the highest. The point of Goldberg theory is not to ascertain what defines the goodness or rightness of the act. Thus, in this sense, Goldberg's idea is an ethical theory. Instead, it is a psychological theory that attempts to describe the stages of a person's growth in moral thinking. The third and highest level of moral development for Goldberg is what he calls post-conventional, since the morally responsible agent recognizes that what is good or right is not reducible to following the rules of one's group. Instead, it is the question of understanding personally what one ought to do and deciding, using one's free will, to act accordingly. This level, which is also divided into 2 stages, the 5th and the 6th, represents the individual's realization that the ethical principle she has rationally arrived at takes precedence over even the rules of conventions that her society dictates. The 6th and highest stage of the moral development that exists even beyond the 5th stage of the social contract is choosing to perform action based on universal ethical principles that one has determined by herself. One realizes that all the conventions, laws, rules, and regulations of society are only correct if they are based on this universal ethical principle. They must be followed only if they reflect universal ethical principles. This is for Goldberg, the full maturity of post-conventional thinking, since this stage recognizes that in the end, the question of what one ought to do goes back to the individual moral agent and her own rationality. The significance of studying the different ethical theories and frameworks becomes clear only for the individual who has achieved or is in the process of achieving moral maturity. For someone who is still in Goldberg's pre-conventional or conventional stages, moral violation remains a matter of seeking reward or avoiding the punishment, or at best, a question for following the dictates of other people. And that's all for the moral deliberation. Thank you.
I am Charity Amparado, Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English, of Philippine Advent College. Have a great day, guys! Before I start our lesson, let's have an activities. I will show you some pictures and I want you to tell what do you feel towards the pictures using emoji. Okay, are you ready? Let's start. First picture, second picture, and the third pictures, and the fourth picture, and the fifth picture. Excellent! I guess all of you have a different reactions and feelings on the pictures of being shown. And now let's proceed to my topic. Feelings in moral deliberation. Emotions or feelings have long been derided by purely rationalistic perspective, having no place in a properly execute moral decision. This prejudice, however, need to be re-examined truly. Although some emotions or feelings can derail one from a clear-minded decision in an ethical situation, it is also not possible that the human choice can be purged of all feelings the moral against, after all, neither robot nor computer. A more realistic attitude toward decision-making is to appreciate the indispensable roles emotions have on agent's act of the choosing. Aristotle precisely points out that moral virtue goes behind the mere act of intellectual in the identifying the right things to do. According to Aristotle, emotions are an original and integral part of virtue. Ethics emotions are an inherent part of our moral reasoning and being, and therefore there should be an inherent part of any moral deliberations based on Aristotle's view. There are 5 specific aspects of emotions. First is the descriptions of emotions. And the second is the attitude towards emotions. Third is the truth present in emotion. And the fourth is the reliability of emotion. And the last is and the reasonable principles that guides an emotion. Part of what makes one a human being, there is a popular Filipino saying, tulak ng bibig, kabig ng dibdib. Literally, the mouth says one thing, but the heart drives you to do another things. This saying and mean that what an individual says, and in that sense, what an individual mind or intellect dictate what come out to do can sometimes be overcome by what her feeling actually drives her to do. This part of the genius of Aristotle is his realization that it is possible that there can be disconnect between intellectual knowledge of a good and actual ability of an individual to perform. Accordingly, the latter is mainly functions of character's formation, that is of habituating the proper managing one's feelings in the rightful manner. This passionate moral decision maker is a realistic ideal. The passion or feelings do not necessarily detract from making an informed moral decision. One can even argue that making a moral decisions, because it is all about what the values cannot but involve her most serious feelings, means the right feeling required for a truly informed moral decision. The matured moral agent realized that she is not both a product of many forces, elements, and events, all of which shape her situation and options of a decision. She also realized that she is not merely a product of external causes. Instead, a meaningful moral decision is one that she make a full cognizance of where she is coming from, where she ought to go. That at this point, we are ready to identify the step on making informed moral decision. That's
Good day everyone, so now we're going to discuss about the moral problems. So what must a morally mature individuals do when she confronted with a moral problems? So in order to answer these questions, we must be first understand that there are different types of moral problems, each one requiring us a particular set of rational deliberations. So the first step, the first that we ought to take if there's a potential ethical issues is to determine our level environment is the in the case hand. So do we need to make a moral decisions in situations that we need action in our on our part, or we are trying to determine the right thing to do in a particular situations being discussed. So in the later situations, we may be making a moral judgment or on a particular case, but one that does not necessarily involves ourselves. So we may we may be we may just be reading about a case that involves other people, but we are not part of the case. So in ethics class, student are made to imagine that what they would do in a particular situation. So their moral their moral imagine their moral imaginations is being exercised in the hope of cultivating moral reasoning and giving direction to the needed cultivations of their feelings through habits. So being a moral agent especially refers to the later situation. We must therefore identify this which activity we are engaged in, and whether we are making a judgment on a case that we are not involved in. We If we are not involved in, or if we truly need to make a decisions in situations that demands that we act. So, after ascertaining our involvement in the potential moral situations, we need to make sure of the facts. So, the first fact to establish is whether we are faced with a moral situation or not. So, but if the situation we are involved in truly has more weight, if it's a strike one to the course because it involves what it truly means to be a human, then we must now establish all the facts that might have a bearing on our decision. So we must set aside all considerations is truly factual or merely hearsay, anecdotal, or an unfounded assumptions, and thus unsupportable. So this is where such things as the fake news and alternative facts have to be weeded out. The third step is to identify all people who may potentially to be affected by the implications of immoral situations or by our concrete choice of action. So these people are called the stakeholders in a particular case.
Good day, everyone. At this moment, I am going to tackle the value of studying ethical theories or frameworks. When we talk about ethics, it's more about morality, behavior, and of course, values. So these ethical theories or frameworks may serve as guideposts, given that they are the best attempts to understand morality that the history of human thought has to offer. So here are some two twin questions. First, what ought I to do? Second, why ought I to do so? So we have here the three theories of ethics. First, we have utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is more about equality, the fairness. Utilitarianism pays tribute to the value of impartiality. When we talk about impartiality, it's more about equality. Arguing that an act is good if it will bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of those affected by the action. Each equal to each. Utilitarianism puts with no one being worth more than any other. Whether president or common citizen, rich or poor, man or woman, young or old, everyone has as much worth as anyone else. Next, we have national law theory. So this theory puts more emphasis on the supposed objective, universal nature of what is to be considered morally good, basing its reasoning on the theorized existence of a human nature. It has the advantage of both objectivity and a kind of intuitiveness. So next up, we have Kantian deontology. Kant focuses on one's autonomy as constitutive of what one can consider as moral law that is free from all others and an inclination. When we talk about autonomy, it means you have the right to govern yourself. Deontology is often associated with philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that ethical actions follow universal moral laws such as don't lie. The deontology is simple to apply. It just requires that people follow the rules of their duty. So the last one, we have virtue ethics. Aristotle's virtue ethics in the end indicates is the need for the habituation of one's character to make any and all of these previous consideration possible. To weigh the collective happiness of human beings, to choose to act on what one's innermost nature dictates, and to practice one's autonomy regardless of all other consideration, especially those that impinge on one's will. These are lofty enough to go for human reason and will. Decision about right and wrong permit everyday life. Ethics should concern all levels of life, acting properly as individuals, creating responsible organizations and governments, and making our society as a whole more ethical. Virtue, it means honesty, compassion, courage, generosity. So there are some benefits of ethical theories. What are those? Well, first we have a duty to do good to benefit others. Second, a duty to avoid harming others. Third, allowing others to make decisions for themselves. Fourth, treating all equally. So that's all for my report, and I hope you've learned something. Thank you for listening, and God bless you all. Keep safe!